In a world shaped by algorithms, gaslighting, and industrial-scale propaganda, the truth is under siege. 100 lies repeated enough become accepted fact, unless relentlessly challenged. At Raw Politik, we are proud to announce that we have nominated Gary Lineker for the Nobel Peace Prize. Our nomination of Gary Lineker for the Nobel Peace Prize has now been endorsed by leading international figures, including US presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein and world-renowned surgeons Dr. Mads Gilbert and Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitteh. Their support, along with that of other respected global voices, reflects a growing recognition of Gary's moral clarity and his stand for justice, especially his solidarity with his Palestinian people. At Raw Politik, we are proud to be part of this moment and to stand alongside those who refuse to be silent in the face of injustice. Gary has used the soft power of sport not to entertain, but to expose, to give voice to the silenced, the persecuted, the displaced. His stand matters because so few are willing to take one, and he's not alone. From musicians like Roger Waters, relentlessly smeared for his vocal opposition to Israeli apartheid, to journalists like Katie Halper, deplatformed for calling out what human rights organizations now confirm, to anti-apartheid veteran Andrew Feinstein, who has spent decades exposing the global arms trade fueling these atrocities. These are people with credibility, integrity, and reach, all being punished for telling the truth.
The role of sport in politics is crucial, and we've seen that perhaps more today than at any time in the past, where we see authoritarian regimes in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, in Qatar, using sports to sports wash their images. And we see, virtually every sport, from football, obviously, where clubs are now owned by nation states, and our government in Britain and the Premier League pretend that's not the case, where to anybody who has three functioning brain cells, it's absolutely obvious that it is the case.
We had the Enlightenment a few hundred years ago. We've had time to think about this. We've had 2 world wars since the Enlightenment. And after the second of the 2 great world wars, we all got together in Paris and we all agreed upon the 30 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Mm-hmm. And we all decided it would be a good idea if we had a United Nations and we had a body that could come together where we could all express our opinion and make our minds up about what is allowable in this world of ours, because as far as we know, this is not a drill. We're not going to get 2 goes at this planet.
I think it's great what Lineker did. I think we're seeing more and more people speaking out in the, the sphere of performers, musicians, Kneecap, Roger Waters, Low Key has been great on this issue, just in terms of the cultural sphere. And then you've seen, of course, actors signing a ceasefire pledge, actors condemning Israel's actions. That's very encouraging.
Gary Lineker reposted a short video explaining Zionism. It included commentary from Diana, who joins me now. But the original post also featured a rat emoji, which Gary later apologized for and removed. But the backlash was immediate and severe, with calls for his resignation and accusations of anti-Semitism, despite his long history of standing against racism of all forms. But what got lost in the noise was the message, the reality of Zionism as a settler colonial state. Unfortunately, we're seeing distractions in the mainstream media, like the Gary Lineker controversy. So you were featured in that video. How did you feel watching the conversation shift from the substance of your words, like you just shared with us, to the presence of an emoji?
Mary, you're going to find this funny. I didn't even know that it was my video because I'm not so present on social media, and I certainly didn't make that video. It was actually an interview from last summer, July of 2024, on Mehdi Hassan's head-to-head. So I didn't actually even know it until somebody sent me a notice saying, oh, by the way, you're the subject of a controversy. I thought, me? I am? I didn't, what did I say? And then I realized that it was all about the emoji. And am I surprised? Absolutely not. And this is always the tactic that the Zionists use. They try to latch onto one small thing, and because they want people to be distracted from the message, they latch onto the emoji, they latch onto a word, they latch onto something because they can't attack the message. So they attack the means instead. And that's the tragedy of all of this, is that there was nothing in the video that I said, not that I remember, that I said that is at all controversial, a summary of what Zionism is about. But here we have that that Mr. Lineker has not only resigned, but was forced to resign over an emoji. Again, not over the content, over an emoji. But that's the whole point. It's all about distraction, distraction, distraction. It's about shifting so that it's no longer about the message. It's just about something that's ancillary to the main message.
It's a good segue to talk about Gary Lineker. So I'm wondering, what does it mean to you personally to see someone like Gary, who is from within the heart of the British establishment, refuse to stay silent? That's the first part. And what does the backlash tell us about the moment that we're in?
So, first of all, there's nothing better than addressing a political meeting in Leicester, because whoever is there, the one thing they will have in common is a love of Gary Lineker from every possible community across Leicester. The way he has spoken out about Gaza, unflinchingly, I mean, is a source of enormous pride. I think that he has done the country and the world a service because of how well known he is. And it did take courage for a privileged older white man. And as we've seen, he's lost his job as a consequence. And what that tells us is, the guy who effectively decides the political direction of the BBC is someone who has been not just a lifelong supporter of the state of Israel, but has been an uncritical supporter of the state of Israel, who seems to believe that Israel, because of the history of the Holocaust, can do whatever it likes and should be above criticism. And the BBC has gone from being an entity that I remember as a kid when I used to visit here with my parents, of probably the greatest broadcasting institution on the planet that everyone around the world looked up to. It's gone from that to being a joke today. And I think, Gary Lineker's departure, let's call it that to be polite, is a reflection of how low the BBC has fallen. And it's a tragedy, but it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, the reality of this political moment, where I'm not sure, to paraphrase something that Barack Obama said when he was a candidate rather than after he became president and was such a disappointment. But as a candidate, he said he cannot help but worry at the smallness of our politics by comparison to the vastness of our challenges. And that's what it feels like at the moment. The most mediocre, the most mendacious, the most morally and sometimes materially corrupt are the people who seem to ascend to the highest political offices in the Western world today, and often to the highest corporate offices.
It feels to me that it's very threatening to power structures to have someone who's like a mainstream figure like Gary Lineker speak, express support for the Palestinians. So I'm just wondering if you have any opinion on sport. And it seems like it's become a front line in this narrative war.
It's sport, it's culture, all of these areas have become front lines because, Mary, this is not something that you can, the genocide is not something that you can escape. We're all seeing it. It's broadcast on our telephones. It's live streamed everywhere. And And even if you want to escape it, it's there. And so you see these cultural figures who are recognizing it and are calling it out, as they should. But instead of there being outrage over the genocide, there's outrage. It's all about wordsmithing. It's all about, you use this term rather than that term, because they want us to be people who are living in a world where we're policed, where every single word of ours is policed. So we have to resist properly. We have to speak properly. We have to die properly. And if we don't, then we're just not worthy of being watched.
Well, what would you say to the people who say there's no role for people in entertainment or sports to be talking about this? What would you say to them?
There's a role. What, aren't they? They're not human. There's a role. That's the whole problem, is if we somehow try to extract the things that we do as humans from us being human, then that's a little absurd, don't you think? So in other words, like, the sport person's role is just to play sports, they can't be a human. Well, then well, why don't we just have robots doing it instead, if that's the whole point? An actor can't be an actor, they can't be a human, they just have to play a role. That's it. Of course, we're humans. That's what makes us who we are. And it actually makes you connect even more when you see that they are living, feeling, breathing, thinking, and outraged, just like you and I are.
But I just want to come back to sort of the grassroots movements that you were referring to. Would you like to tell us about the Jewish anti-Zionist Congress that's happening?
Yeah, thank you. So there's the first Jewish anti-Zionist Congress is happening June 13th to 15th. It's in Vienna. You can still get your tickets to attend. I'm one of the speakers, and they're really amazing speakers. And one of the and they're Palestinian speakers as well. There's Gadi Karmi is going to be there, La Mystique, and then there are great Jewish speakers, Ilan Pape, the amazing historian. And one of the organizers of this is Chaim Brashit Zabner, who is a historian and filmmaker, who is one of the subjects of my film, because my film follows the survivors of the Holocaust, but also their descendants. And so Chaim is part of a group called Holocaust Survivors and Descendants Against the Genocide. His parents weighed under 100 pounds when the camps that they were in were liberated. Chaim grew up in Israel and is a very loud, effective, convincing, persuasive anti-Zionist voice. And so he's one of the organizers, and Stephen Kaposh is one of the speakers. And Stephen Kaposh is another character that we follow around in the film. He is Hungarian, but he lives in, he's been in London for decades, but he's from Hungary, and he lost a lot of his family to the Holocaust. He and his immediate family survived, and he's been very outspoken. And I believe it was actually Jeremy Corbyn who kind of opened up his eyes to this issue. I don't want to say who got him active in this issue. He was never a Zionist even. But I think he was inspired to speak out by the bravery and, speaking out of Jeremy Corbyn. So hopefully you guys can put in a link, because I think it's going to be an amazing day and an amazing couple of days. Tony Greenstein, who wrote this fascinating book called Zionism During the Holocaust, is also going to be there. And yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah, it sounds like a great lineup. So everyone should just check the link and sign up and join.
The treatment of Gary Lineker, the treatment of people who are willing to speak out for, as we've described, the world's first live screen genocide, the worst atrocities since the Holocaust, that people who speak out against this are being treated the way they are, should never be forgotten, should never be forgiven, because quite clearly the world, and I think here particularly of Germany, which seems to me to be experiencing a national psychosis, the Western world has behaved disgustingly when it comes to the situation in Gaza. And if people are not forced to account for their actions in the case of the perpetrators and for the defense of the perpetrators by our own governments, corporations, etc., then the world is in an extraordinarily dark place, and I don't see how we emerge from it. So we have a responsibility to humanity to ensure that there is justice and accountability. And we have to start with those in the highest offices, in our governments, in our broadcasters, in our media, in our corporations, and hold them to account.